I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift, a place to inspire growth, resilience, and wisdom, real connection, healthy conversation as we navigate life's changes and challenges together. Because, as I like to say, we are all each other's teachers. Thanks to our friends at the Villages of Lake Highlands for making this podcast possible. Hair and makeup generously provided by Glam House Collective. Hi, I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift. We're at Dallas Irby today, and I'm with my friend Mary Lyons, the wealth woman.
Hello.
Hello. I like barely even say your full name these days. I just call you the wealth woman.
I like that. That's okay. I'm good with that.
What do you do?
Oh gosh, what don't I do?
Yeah.
Let's see. I feel like that's one of those questions that you should be able to answer very succinctly and be on it. It should be rehearsed. And every time somebody asks me that, I feel like I am caught off guard for some reason.
Welcome to my world. I'm an octopus. I do
everything.
Million different things. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say my job is sort of half counseling, half math. And that's a weird combination. But really what I do is I help people understand what their relationship is with money, where it's healthy, where it's unhealthy. And then I help them actually implement a plan that should be focused on increasing how much income they can actually spend and enjoy during their lifetime.
What does a healthy relationship with money look like?
I'm still trying to figure that out personally, right?
Good. It's
a journey.
Not just me.
No, it's a journey, but I think that really there are so many times that we give power to money that money doesn't deserve, if that makes sense. So I think a healthy relationship with money is really understanding that money is just a tool and it is meant to help you build a life that you are really excited about living on a daily basis. And if money holds a different relationship for you, it's worth examining. So an example of that would be, we've all heard the phrase, the love of money is the root of all evil. So if you, for just a minute, replace the word money with any other tool, so let's use hammer, the love of hammers is the root of all evil, you start to realize how ridiculous some of these sayings are where we let money take over, right? Or if you think about, if only I had $1 million in the bank, I would feel safe and secure. But if you were to turn that around and say, if only I owned 1 million hammers, I would feel safe and secure. Those are really weird statements when you take money out of that. And so I think beginning to examine, is money controlling you, or do you get to control what you do with money, is kind of the first step of, okay, now I can have a healthier relationship.
This podcast is called The Shift. We examine shifts in life and healthy ways to navigate them. And I thought the new year is a really nice time to establish or reestablish a healthy relationship with finances. I don't know when you're supposed to think about finances or not think about, are you supposed to, at the beginning of the year, go, all right, this is how I'm going to spend my money for a year? Or, there's so many variables and factors, like money comes, money goes. You don't know necessarily when it's going to come, when it's going to go. So what should we be doing at the beginning of the year as it relates to budgets or whatever else?
I think maybe this will resonate just a little bit. Like, I do yoga with you. Yeah. I think flexibility is actually really key here. I think anytime you approach money with a sense of rigidity, I've got this budget, I can't deviate from it. I've got this income, that's all it's ever going to be. That's when you start making mistakes with money. And so I do think the new year is a good time to examine what you're doing with your money. And I don't like the word budget, if I can be totally honest, because it always seems to me that the word budget is about restriction. It's not about enjoyment or fulfillment or even purpose. It's about minimization. And just in general, I don't like the idea of minimization. Like, I'm definitely a maximalist in almost every aspect of my life.
Because I remember I learned this from you. You go, on your deathbed, you should have like a penny left in your bank account.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I thought we were supposed to save and save and save and save.
Yeah.
And then you're like, for what? And I'm like, don't know.
I don't want anything left in my account because I want to enjoy everything I have and then pass everything else on. Like there shouldn't actually be anything there. But I think that going into the new year, beginning to examine, okay, am I actually spending my money on the things that matter to me? Am I living my dream life? If I'm not living my dream life, what has to change about me and what has to change about what I'm doing with my money to get me closer to that dream life? And these are kind of esoteric questions to some degree, but I think we have a tendency to look at our current income and to decide what's possible. And what we do when we do that is we actually impose limits on ourselves for what we can accomplish because we assume only rich people do that, or I can only do that if I have more money, as opposed to saying, okay, what resources do I have today? How do I take these limited resources and maximize the outputs that they're going to create in every economic situation, whether I just absolutely kill it this year or whether things fall flat? How do I make sure there's enough flexibility in my plan that I get the outcome I want, whether things go right or whether things go wrong? And those could be things that you control, or they could be things that are outside influences that are impacting that. And I think that's one of the things that drives me crazy about modern finances. Even if you go on TikTok or, Facebook or Instagram or wherever people are social media-ing these days, there's all these very prescriptive rules that you're supposed to follow about money, and half of them don't even make sense. So really personalizing the plan that you're on, I think, is important, because I don't want to live my life by somebody else's scorecard, and I don't think you do either. If your advisor is not taking the time to really get to know you and your hopes and dreams and what you want for your individual life, how are they supposed to make your money work for you towards those goals? Otherwise, it's just math on paper, and anybody can do that.
Well, you said something important. You said your advisor. And I'm like, do most people have advisors? And I think the thought around that is like, I have to have a lot of money to have an advisor. A, because it costs a lot, and B, because, well, if I don't have a lot, can't I just manage it myself?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a reason that people think you have to have a lot of money to have an advisor, especially in this city, out networking. One of the questions I get when I say, oh, I am an advisor, or I use any words like that, is people say, oh, what are your minimums, right? Who will you accept as a client? It is never struck me as authentic or helpful or even true to what this career should be to say you have to already be wealthy before I'll talk to you about building your wealth.
You already have to be healthy in order to come to my yoga class.
Yeah. Hey, I feel like the job of any advisor is to meet you where you are and help you take the next step. So if you're already fabulously successful and you just want someone to help you do more, great. But if you're looking at the world going, I don't know how to make my budget work with the resources that I have available, then an advisor should meet you there as well. And that's one of my pet peeves about the industry, is that it's about revenue and revenue generation. And the problem is, when you get too focused on that, is that you lose the human aspect of what it is that you're trying to do. So no, I don't think you should have to have a lot of money to talk to an advisor.
Where does our relationship with money come from? Like, when does that start? I know kids understand money, and they want money, and they know that money gets them things like toys or candy or whatever. So our relationship with money, largely, would it be accurate to say that it comes from our parents?
Yeah, I think to some degree. I mean, we watch them. And so we look and we see what they're doing. So if your parents always had money, then you might think you're always going to have money. Or if you watch your parents struggle to pay the bills, that can actually create one of two behaviors. You could hoard all your resources because you never want to be in a situation where you don't pay your bills. Or you could have the opposite, which is you could turn out like your parents, and as soon as it comes in, you spend and enjoy it because you don't know when you're going to have it again. So there's really, when you start looking at how people experience their childhood and where they create safety, there's kind of an idea of scarcity versus abundance. And when people are rooted in scarcity, that same stimulus can actually have two polar opposite responses, right? The hoarding or the blowing all of it, because but either way, they're rooted in that fear of scarcity. Whereas when you have an idea or a focus on these are resources and I live in a space of abundance, you can start to plan to make sure that that abundance is there, again, regardless of what's happening in the exterior world.
So, I mean, you're a parent, like, how do you explain money to your children?
We talk about money a lot in our house. I am probably one of the least private people I know. Like, I am a consummate oversharer.
Yeah.
And my husband is the opposite. He's extremely private. And so this actually...
That works well.
Yeah. It causes some interesting dynamics for sure. But I'm an open book, and I think it drives him crazy, although he's coming around a little bit. We tell our kids everything. So my kids know how much money I make. They know how much the mortgage is. They know how much we're saving. They have seen what our financial plan looks like. They know what theirs looks like. They know how much money they have sitting in their college funds. They know that, I mean, my kids have had conversations at this point about trapped equity and the concept that as real estate appreciates, you still can't tap into that wealth because when you sell one house, it needs to go into the next one. And my kids are 12 and 9, and this conversation happened 3 years ago during COVID.
Wow.
So I think we decide that our kids are not going to be interested if we aren't interested. And I think we underestimate what they are truly capable of understanding. But I mean, I think in our household, at least, the conversation started as soon as they were old enough to be in a Target and say, Mom, I want that. And I'd be like, all right, we're going to work through the math. How much money do you have? How much money is this? Is that more? Is that less? And then it became more complex. But we even had an episode at some point in Target where my daughter convinced me to buy her something, even though she didn't have enough money to pay for it. And so the deal was, if you finance through the Bank of Mom, then you have to do every chore I tell you to do until you have paid me back. And so she went through this one time, and then we were in Target, and my son was like, Mom, can I finance through the Bank of Mom? And my daughter starts yelling, Debt is horrible. It will ruin your life, at the top of her lungs. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's a little bit extreme. But she's like, no, when you have debt, it means that you have obligations, and you don't get to say no if you want to. And I was like, okay, she's kind of understanding that, because yeah, there's times when debt can be good or debt can be bad. But if she understands I have obligations that debt creates for me, she's already got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We start to see people kind of like money focused, right?
Sure.
In these like young adult years, teenage years. And I feel like that is sustainable for some people, and they are able to grow their money. And for other people, it just never.
They get stuck in consumption.
Yeah. And is it? Oh, so it's consumption.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, if I think back to when I was a kid, and I think I was kind of a weird beast anyways, but I mean, I always had a side job or was babysitting or, was selling candy out of my house or whatever it might be to earn money. Because my parents made a very clear distinction that there was their money and my money. And so it's not that they didn't help me, because I had an allowance and all that, but anything extra that I wanted, it was my responsibility to earn the money to pay for. So one of the things I've done with my kids is they have set expectations in order to earn their allowance, but there are a whole list of other things that they can do to earn additional funds if they want something. And my love language is gift giving. So if they say, Mom, will you buy this? My inclination is to say yes every time. But A, that's bad for my budget. And B, it's not healthy for them for me to do that. So they have their own accounts. They have had their own accounts for a long time. They keep track of what is in the account. And when we are in any store, my question is always, do you have enough money for that? So that doesn't include the savings for the future part of it, but it gets them to the point where they live within their means. And there are times where they're like, hey, Mom, will you buy this for me? And I'm like, no, but you can spend your own money. And they say, okay, I'd like to do that. And then because I know they really want it, I might buy it for them anyways. But if they are unwilling to spend their own money for something, they don't really want it. And so I can guilt-free say no.
Well, I'm asking you all of these like kind of foundational questions because I think it goes back to that, where does our relationship with money come from? And for me, like I'm a risk averse person. I like to save, but I also like to spend a little. But I also am really specific in terms of what, like, shoes and handbags and things like that don't really mean much to me. I'm not like a labels junkie, but like I will throw down on a trip to a place I really want to go.
Yeah.
And that's just me. That's just what I like. And I think that the experiences can't like be matched, So for people who have like, their thing, where they're willing to spend in some cases and they're not willing to spend in other cases. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah.
Kind of like your kids?
Prioritizing what you actually want for the resources that you have available to you. So one of the things I actually teach our clients is to create a dreams pipeline. So not a bucket list of things you're going to do way off in the future, but a running list of all the things that are important to you. So that could be travel and adventure and experiences, or it could be material things, but it could also be something about your health. It could be spirituality. It could be legacy. It could be family and relationships. And I know the first time I did this, it actually led me to going on one of your retreats, because in family and relationships, I put take a trip with mom for the very first time, because my mom and I have never traveled, just the two of us before. But also on my list was do more yoga, right? Learn how to meditate and take a yoga retreat. And so when I looked at my list, I said, look how many dreams I can actually put onto the calendar right now, because I'm planning for it. And so we teach people to go through, we do a workshop where we list all of that out, and we do it as a group. So people share, and then they steal from one another. And then it's a kind of running list. So it evolves. You do things, you realize that wasn't fulfilling, but maybe this other thing was. And then what you do is you take that dreams list and you identify 12 things that you are going to calendar at the beginning of the year. And then you build them into your budget so that every single month you have a dream that's being realized, and it changes the entire cadence of your life, because you always have something that you just did or purchased or whatever it is that gets you excited. And you always have something that you're looking forward to. So when you start thinking about money, just hoarding it and putting it in an account doesn't necessarily give you any real satisfaction or fulfillment. But if you can identify, this is what my dream life looks like, and you can start taking steps towards that dream life, while also looking at how you're laying the foundation for the future, life can be a lot more satisfying.
Yeah. It sounds a lot more pleasant.
Yeah.
Like you actually get to experience what it feels like to live.
Yeah. And I think we don't always do that in this day and age, because we wake up, we get ready, we go to work, we work all day, we come home, we eat. If you have kids, you're dealing with your kids till they go to sleep. If you have a spouse, you're interacting with your spouse and giving to them. And then you go to sleep and you do it again. And I think if you're not careful, life starts to feel kind of monotonous. And that's when people wake up and they think, what am I doing? Is this it? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be if you are looking at how you can better steward your resources. And this is a silly example, but I talked to a client of mine last week who was sitting on $160,000 in a checking account. And I said, is it at least in a high yield savings account? And he said, oh, no, I haven't gotten around to it. And I pointed out to him that 12 months of interest at 5%, which you can get right now on that account balance, was $8,000.
Wow.
And so for someone who's making $80,000 to $100,000 a year, that's like getting a huge raise. And he immediately said, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that this weekend. And so I was like, why would you leave that on the table? Yeah. You can do a lot of really amazing things with $8,000 that magically shows up because you're taking advantage of what the world looks like today.
I love this idea of a dream pipeline, and I'm thinking of it in terms of like what I do, a vision board every year at the beginning of the year. So this is like a financial vision board to me.
Yeah.
And
totally.
So you have workshops about that. And what else do you think is like really necessary at the beginning of the year? You mentioned the word budget. And I'm like, are you supposed to have like a monthly budget, an annual budget? Like what is the right thing to do?
So I don't like budgets.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of us that don't want to sit down in front of a spreadsheet and match up. This is what I was supposed to spend. This is what I spent. There's shame that comes with when maybe you overdo it. Plus, you got to make the time to do, and you don't want to, so you procrastinate.
Right.
I just have never found that budgeting is something that I enjoy, even though I do this for a living and I love talking about money. But the actual budgeting part, I'm like, I don't want to do that. So part of what we actually teach, and I think this is really important, is shifting from saving what's left over to saving what comes first. So there's actually a program out there called Currents that allows you to create what they call a wealth reservoir. And this is all going to go into the budgeting piece. But what happens is you would do something as simple if you have like a W-2 job where you're getting direct deposit. You change where your direct deposit goes. So it goes first into the Currents reservoir, but then you have a direct deposit from there into your account. So I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, anytime there's money in my account, I can find something to spend it on.
Yeah.
Right?
That is true.
Right. If it's there is something I can spend it on.
There's a little I can mess with. Yeah.
But if you think about what happens with your 401k, it comes out before it ever hits your bank account. And you don't think about it because it's just never there. So instead of putting the money into the account where you pay your bills and then you find the things to spend on and then whatever's left over goes to savings, if you put it first into a wealth reservoir and then have the direct transfer into your normal bank so that nothing has to change, your spending sort of automatically adjusts around that. And if you get into a bind, you can move money from your reservoir to your normal account. But you also have this other account where now savings is prioritized and you don't have to be so strict or be in that space where you're like, oh, I can't do that because I need to save money. That's already done. Now you have a permission slip to spend and enjoy. So I recommend setting up where all your bills get kind of automatically paid. Then there's a direct transfer to like a short-term savings. So you've got a little emergency fund. Your long-term savings was taken care of before it started. And then I give myself a weekly allowance because that's how we grew up. We grew up getting money on Fridays.
Girl,
so
I didn't grow up with that, but I like that idea. I will implement that for myself.
Yeah, because you don't have to think then about how am I going to budget everything over the whole month. You just have a separate account that says, this is what I can spend this week. And if I can be totally candid, I'm broke every Thursday in that account, but I know I'm going to refill it every Friday. And so it sort of puts these guardrails where I'm like, oh, I can spend whatever's in here. And then I don't have to think about when does my paycheck come in and when is this bill due, because all that happens automatically from the other account. And this is the money already that's left over that I have guilt-free permission to spend.
How do we plan for the unexpected? Is there a way to do that?
I think there is. I mean, this is why having access to your own capital is really important. I teach a strategy called the private reserve strategy. And it is the idea that rather than just taking your money and sitting it in your bank account where maybe it's earning or maybe it's not, in the case of some of the people I talk to, you're actually building up a reserve that is meant for these types of situations so that rather than when you have an emergency, positive or negative, instead of going to credit cards and paying a credit card company at 24% or going to your bank and taking a personal loan at 9 or 10%, you actually have a fund. And even if you move that over, you essentially pay yourself back with the same interest that you would be paying to a financial institution. And so what happens is it sort of artificially creates extra savings, but because you know you're replenishing it with profit, and I'm gonna definitely use air quotes for that, there's less guilt about tapping into it, and you know that your money is continuing to earn and compound for you for the rest of your lifetime. And you can't prepare for those events if you don't save in advance. So I think the kind of initial thought of you do the savings and everything else comes into your account helps prevent some of the lifestyle creep that maybe is unnecessary. But it also puts you into a position where you already have that reservoir when you need it because something does come up. Because that's the thing about life. It's never what you plan, right? Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not, but if the life I scripted is the one I was living, it would be very different.
Oh,
right?
Mine is very different. Yeah.
I don't think it would be better.
No,
it would be different.
Not necessarily. Yeah, no. And that's what makes life kind of fun, I think.
Yeah.
By like mid-year, is there a goal or an intention that we should set? Like, do we have to revisit this pipeline by 6 months in, or do we do something quarterly that is like a healthy exercise financially?
Yeah, I think at least having these conversations quarterly is important. And if you're single and you're doing it by yourself, great. But if you're, in a relationship, do it with your significant other, because I think there's actually an intimacy that gets created in those conversations. And there should also be check-ins if you are working with an advisor, with the advisor, about how you're progressing, what might be changing, what's working, what's not working, because everything about even the plan plan that you end up implementing to get you to retirement, among the other things that you're doing, should be able to change or pivot as you make changes. I mean, the worst thing you can do is lock yourself into a strategy that requires you to work a job you hate forever. And so I think being really honest with yourself and with whoever is on the journey with you about how things are working is key. And I think the biggest part of that is when you are assessing what's happening, leaving judgment out of it. And even if you're looking at your own behavior, you're looking to understand, not to judge yourself. Because if you can get to a place where you understand why you're doing something and you're not judging it, then it's much easier to change that behavior than if you have a bunch of shame wrapped around it.
This is like the psychology of money.
For sure.
Yeah. And how you interact with other people around the concept of money, whether it's your children, whether it's your spouse or partner, or whoever's on the journey with you. I like how you said that. There's also, this idea, this concept that we should be caring for other people, elderly parents, and worrying about sort of the finances wrapped around as they get older, right? I don't know how to plan for that. And I don't know what is in the Wealth Woman book of guidance around, planning for others as you would for yourself.
Yeah, I think focusing on income maximization as opposed to building net worth actually fixes a lot of those problems. The way our industry was kind of created, if you kind of go back in time a little bit, this idea of retirement is actually relatively new when you think about it in the history of mankind. Yeah. Because if you think about life expectancy right after World War II, it was 62 or 63 years old. So right about the time people were getting to the place where maybe they weren't going to work anymore, they didn't have to have another 35 years of income creation built for them. And in that environment, there were pensions and Social Security. So income was taken care of. And if you look at what's happening now, we live in a totally different world where Social Security probably isn't going to replace most people's lifestyle, and most people don't have pensions. So if you think about the old school environment, the role of the financial advisor was just to grow your net worth. But if you look at what's happening today, growing your net worth looks great on paper, but if that isn't going to translate into income that you can live off of for the duration of your retirement, however long that is, then your advisor's not doing it right. And so there almost needs to be a shift right now away from just rate of return and how big is the pot of money into, again, these are my resources. How do I optimize or maximize the income that they're actually creating? Because you can have one asset and I can have another asset. And I'm going to give an extreme example of this. But I had a client who reached out to me a couple years ago and he said, I have $10 million of real estate that I own free and clear, no mortgages, no debt, and I can't retire. And I thought to myself, how big is your income need? That was my first thought. Yeah. And then I said, okay, well, let's talk about what's happening. So this gentleman had invested for appreciation. He bought a bunch of vacant lots, and then he had one apartment complex. And the apartment complex threw off enough money to pay the taxes on the $10 million worth of real estate, but there was no actual income. So what happens when we focus on net worth is that it looks good on paper and we can brag at cocktail parties and we can feel really fancy about what we're doing, but it doesn't actually translate into lifestyle. And when you shift over to income creation, you're going to make totally different decisions about what assets you put your money into, and it takes a lot less to create a lot more robust income. So then if you are looking at taking care of parents or dependent children who will always be dependent, that efficiency of income creation has to be the first priority.
And I think, I bet someone out there is listening to this and going, $10 million in an apartment complex and all this stuff must be nice.
Right.
But I also know, just based on watching the news, right, that so many people are struggling right now. Struggling paycheck to paycheck.
Correct.
Hustle and grind day after day. Is it possible to climb out of that?
Yes. So I'm going to give examples because I think it's the easiest way to see this. I had, I say a young woman, she's our age. I like to say that.
We're young.
We are. Mm-hmm. So she's probably 40-ish.
Okay.
And she has an IRA that she has done an amazing job building. It had about $120,000 in it. And then she had 20 grand sitting in a checking account. So we're not talking $10 million at this point. We're talking a very different amount. And that's still a lot of money. So I want to be very, very clear about that. But she was able, because of the job she was in, she had taken a pay cut to move into something that was much more enjoyable, less stressful, better life decision for her. She was capable of saving about $200 a month, a little over that. So we did kind of a projection of if she stays in kind of the traditional, I'm going to leave my money invested, it's earning 6%, whatever it is. And then she was going to take $15,000 of the 20 each year and do private money lending. So that was her plan when she came in to talk to me. And if you look at what that did for her over from that date, 25 years later to age 65, she was only going to have about $18,000 a year of income off of what that was going to build. What I did is I showed her a different way to do what she was already going to do. So it had to do with how she was saving the 20 and the 200 and then putting it into the private reserve strategy that I teach so that would keep growing and she would still have use of the money to do what she was going to do anyways. And it helped her create some tax deductions, but it kept her money growing without giving up the use of it for the private money lending. And it actually changed what she was able to spend to closer to $36,000 of income per year because she now was getting two uses for the same dollar, the compounding in the strategy, and then also what she was doing for the investment. And so when you start looking at creating those efficiencies, it means you have more money that you get to spend on the back end. And when you think about it, you can look on the surface and say, well, that doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, an extra $20,000 a year. But if you're going from 18 to 36, that's a really big jump.
Big difference,
right? Especially when then you add Social Security on top of that. Now you're in a place where that's actually livable. And if you take an extra $20,000 over 30 years, that's $600,000 more that she can enjoy in her lifetime simply because she was more efficient with her strategies. So it doesn't take a whole lot of money to create a whole lot of money. It just takes looking at, okay, is doing things the conventional way actually going to get me what I want? Because the conventional way is about do less now, save more, and eventually you can have this life you're excited about. But when you get to retirement, then what advisors start saying is, well, you can't really spend a lot of money because you might run out. And so you get in this sort of deprivation mindset where you aren't really living, to your point earlier, versus looking at, again, how can I be more efficient and build a system where each dollar is creating more than one benefit for me. And then I'm going to focus on income on the back end. And I know I just said a lot of word salad, but it's not as hard as people think.
Well, and I was like, okay, do normal people know this stuff?
No.
Because that's what you teach. Like,
Right.
So this is, you are helping them with a strategy in order to grow the money in the way that is going to be the best for them.
Yeah.
Which is what you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I hear most frequently when I sit down and really focus on educating people on how the money works is it's easier than they expected it to be. And then almost every single time they tell me, I wish I'd met you 20 years ago. And I'm like, I don't think you would have listened 20 years ago because I was 22 and kind of obnoxious. So it's probably better you're meeting me now.
I just want to ask you one more thing before we go, and that's about investments, because I feel like, people are sort of confused about where to invest as it relates to industry and how much. And is that something that you also offer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Guidance on that.
There's, I feel like one of the questions I get is how much should you be saving?
Yeah.
And I actually think that's not the first question to ask. The first question is, well, where are you putting it? Because that actually determines how much you need to save. Whereas if I just say, oh, everyone should save 20%. Well, the math is very different for someone who's 20 versus someone who is 60 years old. That what you need to save changes really radically. So it has to be very much customized for the individual. And I also think this idea of take risk when you're young and then get conservative when you're older has always struck me as being very backward. And the reason being, if you only have $10,000 and you put it in a risky investment and you lose all of it, how do you feel? Terrible.
Not good.
But if you have $1 million,
good.
if you have $1 million and you put $10,000 into an investment and you lose $10,000, like it's a bad day, but it's not catastrophic.
Sure.
So, I think being very deliberate and starting to question, okay, I've heard the same thing over and over again. Does it actually pertain to me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the beginning of the year is such an interesting time to think about money and your relationship, a healthy relationship with money, for people who are thinking, well, maybe this is the year I do have a child, or maybe this is the year we buy a house, or maybe this is the year I'm getting married, right? Like these big, I'm thinking of like
big life events,
big life events that come with big costs as well. And for me, it's always, where am I going to go this year?
Yeah.
Which big trip am I going to take this year? Is there any final thought that you kind of want to leave us with as we start the year off right?
Yes. Money should be fun. Oh. If it is not fun and it is stressful, that means you need to go talk to somebody about it and start taking steps towards making money, like create more fun in your life, because it is just a tool and you get to decide if that tool builds something you're excited about or if it just sits there and you keep looking at it wishing like it would just take care of itself.
Yeah. I think this is going to be the year. I didn't want to start off with this being about me, but I think this is going to be the year I actually try to understand money better.
Yay.
Because you're excited about that. Not so much me.
Well, I'm excited because I'm writing a book and I'm going to send it to you when it's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, congratulations. That is huge. And I think because I have kind of always been like, I don't really fully understand this, so I'm just gonna like set it over here. Like money comes, money goes, good enough. Like let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
And I do think, and for my single friends out there, we talk about this a lot, where it's like, oof, I'm glad I don't have to worry about kids, or I'm glad I don't have. But there are things that are unexpected that may pop up that you can't plan for. And I think it's wise to kind of know where you're going, or have some sort of at least semi blueprint before you get to a place where you're like, oh shoot, now I'm stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, the other thing for people who are single, it is that much more important to address it, because if I totally screw up, my kids have to take care of me, right? They're going to have enough guilt right there that they're going to. But if I don't have kids, I don't have that safety net. So it becomes that much more important to make sure that I have made good choices with my money, and that my money will take care of me when I am no longer able to take care of myself.
This is why we have nieces and nephews.
Oh, there you go. You just make sure those relationships are really tight.
They don't know it yet, but they'll be taking care of Aunt Sonia. Mary, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I always learn a lot from you. And let people know where to find you.
Yeah, if you're anywhere you social media, at The Wealth Woman. You can also find me at wealthwoman.com.
Okay, I have a feeling your office is about to get a call very soon. I got my phone ready. Thank you again. And thank you all for watching The Shift. I'm Sonia Azad. Remember to like, share, subscribe. And if you've got a question for Mary, leave it in the comments and we'll get them over to her. See you next time. (983) And don't forget about our friends at Glam House Collective. Let's get glam.